Hey everybody, my name is Clay, and I am one of the ambassadors for the Enneagram Prison Project, otherwise known as EPP. And this is the second episode of the Enneagram Prison Project podcast. If you missed the first episode, feel free to go back and check that out. But tonight, Susan and I are going to discuss our recent trip to Europe. We went to Denmark, we went to Finland, and we're also going to discuss what it's like to go to prison in Scandinavia and how they do things just a little bit different than we do here in the States. We're also going to talk about a very exclusive club that you can only be a member of if you have a criminal history. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get right to that conversation. Last time we talked, we were getting ready for the trip over to Denmark, and we went to the IA Europe conference there in Copenhagen. And then shortly after that, we went to Finland for a little bit. So that was a pretty cool trip, and 10 or 11 days worth of stuff to talk about. But I just wonder, an overview of the whole trip for you. How did things go for you?
I think it was amazing. I haven't traveled like that for a long time. To just be in another country is really sort of turns you upside down in a lot of ways. We went with a big vision, a big intention, and that is we wanted as many other people who wouldn't necessarily be exposed to Enneagram Prison Project here in the U.S. to understand what we're trying to do, what our vision is. And so bringing yourself and Vic Soto with us was really purposeful. It was a stretch for us, honestly, and I thought it was so worthwhile because I think that we've captured some things on video, and I definitely speak from my heart, but there's nothing like real people who have been doing this work in the trenches, like yourself and Vic, to be able to talk to it live. And the other really special thing was that we were joined by a new ambassador in Denmark named Marcus, who's been working with Klaus for a long time over the last year and a little bit on himself. He's a type 8, and he showed up too with us with a lot of presence, and I think gave us even more credibility in his own country that this is possible, not just for those Americans over there, but for everybody. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know how that was for you, having another ambassador join you that you didn't know.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, the trip as a whole, you said it was, you never quite traveled that way, to that extent or whatever before. And for me, I've never even left, I've left Texas, obviously, but I've never left the States. So the whole trip, and I speak for Vic on that too, both of us, it was our first time going abroad. So that in itself brings its own level of excitement / anxiety,
Right.
Honestly. As a felon leaving the country and not really knowing how it's going to be when you land. But it was great. The people in Denmark were very accepting. It was very clear that they wanted us there, and it was just really awesome. And then, having a new ambassador sit between us on the panel was exciting. And Marcus has an exceptional story, and maybe we'll talk about that more one day, but just everything that he did that day I was so impressed, and quite frankly just proud to sit next to him as he kind of opened up in front of a room of people that really we didn't know. It's people who come to see us, so they have some idea of who we are, but there's a certain level of vulnerability that comes with telling your story in front of what feels like a group of strangers. But the group there felt nothing like strangers by the time we were done. They were very affectionate, hugging us. One lady, we didn't make it 5 minutes into the panel before she was out of her seat and wanting to give Vic a hug.
Right.
And that was that's kind of how it felt. Just in general as the thing closed. So I liked it. It was cool. And then it's also, as the 5, I like to just sit back and listen to other people talk for once.
Yeah.
And not be front and center so much. So
yeah,
it was pretty cool.
It just reminds me of the beginning when I first started to teach the Enneagram, and I would get one place to go teach, and I would be so anxious inside of myself and preparing for it and think, well, maybe these people wouldn't get it. Maybe these church folks would be more skeptical or judgmental. And then I'd go and teach and find wow, they really got it. They were really receptive. And then I'd get an opportunity to teach in a corporation. I'd think, oh God, well, these executives, these are going to be really tough guys. And then they would really get it. And I can do that inside of myself over and over again. And I keep every time on the other side of it wondering, what am I going to learn? The people really are all the same. And just when I think I've got it, my ego does that one more time. And I had that a little bit going into this European conference, just because I haven't spent as much time on that part of the world. And there were probably, I think, what did they say, 22, 24 other countries represented,
22,
Clay?
yeah.
22. And 165 people there. So it was a really international crowd. And yes, people self-selected into that crowd as IEA members, as people who understand the Enneagram already, but they were all heart. And then when we left there, we went to Helsinki for the 20th anniversary of the IEA Finland with Laura Valtonen, I'm trying to say it like a Finnish person, and her parents who, have done so much to create Enneagram awareness in their own country. And Laura had told us, it's a 5 country. So in my mind, I start doing my thing like, well, maybe these are the folks that are going to be different. They're going to be removed. And people told us, well, don't have very high expectations because they're quite, unemotional. And they were no different, and really
right.
Hugs all around and lots of tears. And I just think that people who are working with their own personal prison understand so readily when someone like you is courageous enough to own their past and talk about how you really see yourself. And I just want to say, like what you said about Marcus, and for yourself and Vic and all the other people that have ever sat on panel, is a choice to show up and to talk about yourself really candidly and honestly. Every sentence that comes out of your mouth, and the courage that it takes to talk to tons of strangers about something that society really wants to judge you for, I think is remarkable. So I felt really proud to sit next to you also, and really proud to represent Enneagram Prison Project. It was awesome.
Well, I agree. I felt like it was just an awesome experience. And I'm wondering, it's a little off topic, but I have to ask your opinion on this. How much of your expectations, I don't know if that's the right word, but just not being sure if this next group will accept it, how much of that is attributed to type? Because I actually never experienced that. I'm to the point now, I mean, maybe I did, at first, but I feel like now that, I've seen it happen so many times where people just are ready to accept us and just love us. And it makes it a lot easier, from that first panel that we did in Denver, that was pretty tough. But then the next one was easier because of Denver. And then the next one was easier because of the first 2.
Right,
and as we keep doing it, so I'm to the point now to where, and granted I'm a 5, so going into Finland, a 5 country, as they say, I was already comfortable and excited about that. But I have the attitude going into that of, I'm already accepted. Now I just get to tell them what they're here to hear. So how much of that do you think is type versus something else coming into play?
I think it's largely type. That's my own, stuff that's going on, and that's just part of what I bring with me and part of why I go to teach what I teach, because I would like to be able to put that part down. And just the truth is, it comes back up. Like, we're never done. I'm working my own edge. So that's why they say, teach what you need to learn. Apparently I really, really need to learn this, and I want to learn it in a big way, because it isn't true. It's totally not true. And that's the delight on the other side is, oh, wow, I get to see myself again and see that that's not even true.
Yeah. And I hope that you are learning that each time that we go and get to experience this all over again. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that the other part of experiencing it is that so many people put their hands up and say they want to help. And I think, how fantastic. But what I've also been learning is that you have to be quite organized in order to accept people's help, because you have to know where to put them. So I don't know if I can change the topic a little bit.
Yeah, we're organized. Segue right into that.
We're getting organized. And we have a new executive director with my husband, Rick Olesic, who is taking on that role. And he's about 2 months into it now. And oh my God, we're so glad, because Rick is a self-preserving 7, and he is a systems guy from Stanford and has been doing information technology for the last lifetime, and he has us so organized. He's created these different teams. I think he has about 20 in mind, but we're starting off with about 5 on a social media team, a legal team, a fundraising team, a ambassador team, a reentry team, and putting people in place so that we can actually say, yes, we're happy to have your help when you want to raise your hand. So you can get in touch with Rick Olesic at Rick at EnneagramPrisonProject.org and let him know when you want to be a part of things. And we're we're happy to help you help us.
Rick is the person to get a hold of if you want to be a part in any way. And I'll say his email address again. It's rick@enneagramprisonproject.org. And even if it's just a question of, curiosity that you have, something that you want to ask, send him an email and get involved, because obviously if you're listening to this or watching this, there's at least a little bit of interest there. So I'll just say do something about it.
Yeah,
and Rick is the person to talk to on that.
That's right.
One last thing about the trip to Finland that I wanted to talk about was we had a particularly interesting trip there to a local prison. We went to Helsinki prison, and it was unusual for somebody like myself I've been incarcerated, so I know how America does prison. We don't do prison reform at all. I just know how we do prison. I know how we do punishment. Mm-hmm. And it's not like that in other places in the world. And it was kind of bizarre to walk into a facility there and see how somebody else does it. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. So I want to know, what was your takeaway from that?
There's a lot of stuff in the media about prison in Scandinavia, and the skeptic in you, whoever's listening, might be like, well, is it really as good as they make it sound? And I will tell you, yes, it's that good, especially compared to the conditions that you're describing, Clay, that people don't wear uniforms, people just wear their clothes, and people don't have a number, they have a name. And people live in their cells, yes, that get locked at night, yes, but they look a lot like college dorms. They have their own materials up on the walls and bedding and tastes of home and things that make them individual. They have a well-equipped kitchen where they share in making the common meal. They have, I didn't notice it in this one, but in other prisons I visited in Denmark and Norway, they have the knives up on the metal block on the wall so that they're easy to access.
They have that there too. In Helsinki. Yeah.
They had a game room full of, like with a guitar and a, PlayStation thing set up. It is remarkable, the difference.
Darts. They had darts.
Right. Right.
It was totally, it's not anything that we see here in America.
And it reminded me of, I did a workshop with Margaret Smith, and Suzanne Dion came down with me. It was like October, I think 2 years ago in October. And we used the model that Margaret works with in terms of looking at all the different domains. And we did sort of a mock-up of the prison system, and we looked at it as like, how could it be sort of from a utopian, idealistic standpoint. And we talked about, well, what if the correctional officers were actually care officers? And honestly, it's what it feels like when you go into that prison, that the officers are there literally to take care of the people in their charge and to help them to heal. And there was so much, not just structural support, but the people that we met and the roles that were meant to do the caretaking felt to me really genuine. I don't know, how did they come across to you, Clay? Because you're the BS detector. Yeah,
well, I mean, it was kind of mind-blowing to me to just see how things are done so differently, because we have in the States, we have such a punishment-oriented way of thinking, and not just with prison, like even me as a dad, like when my son acts up at school, like it feels like the natural reaction is to punish that instead of try to look at the source of the misbehavior or whatever. And it's a way of thinking that's it's hard to kick.
Yeah.
And so to be in another culture, in another country, in another prison, and to see that people are doing things so much differently than what I am used to, it was just kind of weird, honestly. And I think, if we could just convince people to do things that way here, it would. I mean, we have more prisoners than anybody in the world, so
right.
I mean, we could really stand to learn a lot from an experience like that. And my experience was, to answer your question, I totally didn't feel like I was in a prison with guards who were hounding me and following us everywhere we went. I mean, we went in. I never even showed anybody my driver's license, my passport, anything. They just opened the door and brought us in. And during our entire trip, they never verified who we were. And it just shows this level of trust and also a level of comfort with, they know that they're doing the right thing and they're okay letting people in. And they know that Vic and I are ex-cons. They know that we're coming there with a criminal history, and I'm sure they know what we did to some extent, and they know a little bit about our stories, but still, they just open the door and almost like it was their home, like come in and take a look. And I'm talking about the facility. I'm not talking about the inmates. That's the facility's mentality, and it says a lot about who they are and the work that they're doing. And when we went up to the wing where the guys where the inmates were, it was like you said, it was like a college dorm. I mean, they had a room with the kitchen and actual ingredients to make actual meals. You know, they have a dining room table. They have, you know, the game rooms, all these other things, and it didn't feel like prison. And you know, people here think, well, gosh, if they're in prison, it should feel like prison. And I don't agree with that. I think in a past life, or maybe even a decade ago, before I was locked up, I would have thought that this was absurd and that it wasn't doing anything good. But when you exist and you can be in the same room with those guys, and you don't feel like you're with a bunch of animals who did these terrible things in the past. You just feel like you're in a place where people need healing.
Right.
And to me, that's really what prison is. I mean, it's a place where people need healing. Whether or not they accept it is on them.
Right.
That's up to the person who's doing the time. But it's not. You don't just lock people up and throw away the key and expect them to magically get better and then release them back into the world however many years later. I mean, if you do that, they're going to go back, most likely, in my opinion. So it's right to do things the way that they're doing them in Finland and Denmark and all these places that, you know, you see on Facebook that they do it so much better over there. And I always wondered too, like, is that legitimate, or are they really doing things better? And and I'm happy to say that from my personal experience, I'm just so impressed and I jealous that we don't do things as well as they do, because our numbers are showing that what we're doing is wrong.
Right. Right. And I think that it's important to share this. That's why I like to keep talking about it, writing about it, presenting about it, because it's sort of a long education, I think, for people to get their mind around how we could do it differently. And I think that I'm pretty open-minded. I think that I have an idea that we could do things differently. But when I went last year, Klaus and I toured a prison in Denmark, and they shared their sort of handbook of how they approach things, and normalization was top of the list to make people feel as normal as possible, and they weren't carrying weapons, and they weren't, having all these different restrictions. And we went to a prison called Bastoy Prison, which is an island, and there are about 115 guys there from all different walks of life, and what they have in common is that they're within 5 years of paroling. And I remember asking the guard there why he didn't carry a weapon, and he looked at me kind of quizzically, and he said, "My mind is my weapon." And I really, that has just always stayed with me, because he explained, and I understand now, like, if I have to use a weapon to get you to do what you're supposed to do, then do I really believe that you're going to re-enter and reintegrate back into society? Like, they hold everybody as there temporarily. They're there to heal so that they can remember how to come back. So it's not normal to walk around and have everybody around you have a gun, maybe more so in America, but that's not the goal, you know? And I just think that coming with that premise of trust is so different. And I will admit, even when I was there, this was last year, there was a man who we were waiting to visit, and the guard that I met on the way in was, very friendly, and he said he loves his job because he gets to hang out with the guys and play ping pong with them, and yet the man that I was going to visit, I thought was kind of hanging back from him a little bit. And later, when we went to visit, the man who's incarcerated said, I don't like that guy. And I said, well, why? And he said, because he thinks he's better than me. And I'm really still sort of ashamed to admit that one of the first thoughts that went through my head was, well, you are in prison, right? And I thought, God, how our thinking runs us, and how hard it is to shed those thoughts. Right, I have them too, and so I really like people to know I have them too, so that when you have them and you hear about what we're doing, it's okay, right? You've got a lot of conditioning, so what's not okay is to not question those thoughts. Like, is that okay? Thinking this way,
it's hard. I mean, it's the conditioning that we have, it's the culture that we're, in, and we just kind of think as inmates as sometimes not being as human as the rest of us, and what a shame.
What a shame.
No bueno. No good.
No.
You mentioned about people getting out. And in Finland, their life sentence is actually 14 years. So they're in the States, we lock people up for drugs forever, and they never get out. And that was another thing that just it popped into my head that they do differently. And I agree with that. I think maybe one day, hopefully in our generation, or maybe my kids' generation, that they'll see that here in America we're starting to do things differently, or that we start doing things. I'll just say that we'll start doing things right, because what we do now is wrong, and it's I think it's literally incorrect, and it's not working. So,
well, and part of changing it, I think, is just doing things differently, trying to think differently. I mean, everyone, we're part of this collective, so when you change your thinking, it does affect the whole, right? It really, really does make an impact, and every little bit helps. There are guards who have been really sort of stereotypical, what you hear about in the media, yelling at people in institutions where I've worked. And those same guards have then later sort of converted themselves and been one of the biggest advocates for our class, recruiting people that they think would go and get something out of it, because they see that the material that's being taught in that classroom is working. So I would say, don't write anybody off. Don't think anybody can't change. And one of the quotes I love to have on my email is by George Eliot, and she said, "It's never too late to become the person that you might have been." And thank goodness we can change.
I wrote a paper when I was in high school that I still have. I came across it when I was finishing up the book and just going through old stuff of mine. But I wrote a paper when I was about 14 years old that said, the gist of the paper was that people who do crime should go away and should not, basically shouldn't be able to come back. And
wow.
I was very, pro punishment, pro death penalty, pro everything. If you can't exist among the regular people, then you don't deserve to exist. And that was, I didn't say it quite that harshly, but you can see that that's where my heart was as a 14-year-old or 15, however old I was. I wasn't old enough to drive, yet I was already sharing very harsh opinions on crime and criminals. And obviously, a lot of people know that my route went through prison and crime and all that good stuff, and I'm on the other side of it now. And I'm happy to say, proud to say that I don't think that way anymore. Right. That I've somewhere along the line I noticed that there was something wrong with my thinking, and I'm one of those people who say, if I can do it, then anybody can. And we could apply that to the way that I think, the way that I handle my money. I mean, everything that I do now as 36-year-old Clay is a lot different than the way I did it 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
And it's because of a willingness to change, and that starts with a willingness to take a look at myself and say, okay, what's not right here? Because obviously I'm not perfect and I need some help, and that's kind of the first step. And I agree that there are guards who are on our side, that they're doing things the right way and that they care about their job. Even here in America, even in the States. I mean, I can still remember guards from when I was locked up who, I wish I could run into them somewhere so I could shake their hand and just tell them, keep doing what you're doing. It's not appropriate to do that as an inmate,
right.
But if I could just come back across those folks in another scenario, I want to just kind of give them a thumbs up and say, keep doing what you're doing, because we need more people like that. And potentially somebody who's watching this or listening to this right now who is that person who works in a prison or who believes in prison reform as an actual thing instead of just punishing the hell out of people. And that's the kind of people that I want to be in touch with. That's the kind of people that we need on our team. So please, again, I'll just an outright request to get in touch with us if that's you. And even if you don't know about the Enneagram, if you're just in that environment and you want to be, you want to know more, or how you can take this to your job and impact the world in that way, get in touch with us, because it's going to take, like you say quite often, it takes a village, and we need prison guards in our village. Yeah,
absolutely.
So coming back from Europe was. We've been now, I guess, a week and a half or 2 weeks now. We've been back, and the trip hasn't quite left me yet. I'm still there in a lot of ways, and I haven't had the chance to speak with Vic too much. One of the other ambassadors that went with us. Have you had a chance to chat with him and see what his takeaway from the trip was?
Well, I don't know if I've asked that specific question, and we've talked several different times about lots of different things, but it was pretty powerful to have gone and to come back. And, it's almost like a reentry of different sorts. I don't know if you feel that on your end, but I do feel that with my family and having been gone and, trying to pick up the pieces and just get back to work. One of the things I think is really remarkable about the ambassadors, and I include you really in this, Clay, is that we are all so spread out. Like you're in Texas, Clay, Vic is in Arizona, and so is Elam, and other people are in other parts of the state, and not all of our ambassadors stick around here when they get out, for many of them for good reasons. And so we do a lot remotely. We feel like a family, but we're actually quite spread out. So thank God we have this technology to stay in touch and phone and Skype and whatnot. But the other part that I want to say about that is that it means that everybody really has to be on their own path. That the reason Enneagram Prison Project is continuing to flourish is because the real work that happens on the inside started on the inside, and that people take that thing that they learned about staying with themselves, watching their pattern and coming back to a grounded presence, they take that with them during their reentry. And then it takes a village of people like checking in and connecting, and we're developing that infrastructure. But I think the real reason that it's working is because people are doing the work. And there isn't any other way to make it easier, right? It's just something that people have to choose to do on their own.
How many ambassadors do we have now?
I think we're up to 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because when we talked, full disclosure here, we recorded this. Part of the reason I said deja vu all over again is we did this a week ago, and thanks to the 5 who has the rare technological glitch, we didn't get to keep any of that. But we talked about Tony, and I wanted to see. Really, I just kind of want to check in and see, like, it's kind of cool having this, like we have so many ambassadors now that we have to actually think, how many do we have? And and I think you're right. It's 8 or 9 or something like that. And how does that work with a guy who is doing the work on the inside? He's going through your class, and then he gets out.
Right.
What is where does the conversation go from there? Because it's one thing to teach this in prison, but then when he gets out, what happens?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that I have a knack for spotting potential, and I'm happy.
I'm sitting up a little straighter when you say that, by the way.
I think that's true. I would say that about myself, but it isn't just me that's been teaching. Dr. Daniels has been teaching. Susie Herrick taught with us. Suzanne Dion taught with, like a lot of different people have been doing stuff on the inside with us. And so they are also good at spotting potential. And what we started to recognize is that we need to have a system to see, identify the people who are rising to the top. And we know that when people get out, really the proof starts there. Are they going to call us like they say they're going to call us? Lots of people tell me I'm going to call you and don't call. And I don't think it's because they don't have integrity. I think it's because life is really hard when you get out and people get overwhelmed. So it's almost like a funnel, right? We're teaching lots of people, and then the ones that really come through and contact us are the ones that stand out in my mind. We have an ambassador role that we have in our minds, and a contract that people sign to make sure that they know, we know that they know what we're expecting of them. And then we have partnered with Enneagram Institute and Palmer Daniels to start certifying those really cream of the crop people to become certified Enneagram teachers in their own right. And that, I think, is going to be the richest resource for our future teachers. So I'll toot your horn for you that, Clay, you'll probably be the first, if not among the first, to certify. And maybe you want to say something about that. When do you intend to finish that process?
So I go in November, in just a month or two. I'll be going to Colorado to do the master class with Gail Scott. And that's, as far as class time is concerned, that's the last piece for me. I've done parts 1, 2, and 3, and even threw in the inner critic and psychic structures workshop, which is not a prerequisite, but why skip a class that I should take?
Right.
And I have EPP to thank for that, by the way, and people who support the program and donations. I mean, that goes to an actual, that money goes to use in many ways. And one of those ways is that I was able to go to class, and I'm in Riso Hudson, and a couple of the others are in doing the Palmer Daniels trainings. But I was in the Riso Hudson trainings, and after that class I'll have the essays that I need to write, and a couple of I think I need to do a teaching video, a bunch of stuff that I'm really anxious about, because some of the craziest things I've ever done were on video. It's well documented, the crimes that I committed, and banks have cameras everywhere. But for some reason that didn't make me nervous. But teaching the Enneagram on video for certification requirements terrifies me. So, yeah, so we're getting pretty close, and I say we because it's not just me. It's like this whole team of people who are making this happen, and I'm very excited. So the master class in November, and then some essays, which I like writing, so that'll be the easy thing, and then the videos, and then cross our fingers and hope they give me a thumbs up, and I'll join the family of certified teachers. I can't say that without not smiling ear to ear, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre to think.
It is.
Just a few years ago, I'd never heard of the Enneagram before 2010, and now here we are 5 years later, and I'm talking about certifying to teach it. So, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's so incredible, and I think it is so exciting. I really want to highlight that the village in that regard really comes around the faculty from both Palmer Daniels and Enneagram Institute that, starting with Helen Palmer and David Daniels a long time ago have come alongside this project, and Don and Russ and Brian Taylor now, all the people that have helped me to understand the Enneagram enough to understand myself, enough to have the courage to go into prison myself and try to teach this thing. We are all just standing on the shoulders of the people that went first, and I think that you can't ever do this on your own. If it was that simple, we just distribute a Wisdom of the Enneagram book, an Essential Enneagram book to all the people in all the prisons. It's not that simple, right? It comes from the human factor, and so I'm feeling like you are very grateful for all that, and extremely grateful for all the people who have made contributions to Enneagram Prison Project. They absolutely couldn't do this any other way, right? We have had to draw on that generosity so that we can actually create programs, so that we can actually get a teacher in there and teach one more class. So lots and lots of gratitude for that.
Yeah, they're literally the fuel to our fire, because it wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen otherwise without those folks. When we were talking, you mentioned the ambassador contract agreement earlier, and it reminded me of my favorite part of this. I pulled it up on my phone. I'm reading the contract right now, and like the very first thing, it says the EPP ambassador agreement, and the prereq, the very first qualification. If you don't have this, you're not going to be an ambassador. It says EPP ambassadors will have had a criminal background. So it's one of the few things where if you don't have a criminal background, you're not in. So we get to experience all kinds of discrimination for having that record, and this is one of the things where, sorry, if you're not a felon, tough luck. It's
a very exclusive club. Not everybody can get into this one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I fit the description on that, thankfully.
Yeah.
and I don't know. I love that. It's one of the. When I read that the first time, it made me giggle. So I wanted to share that.
I think next time, or one of the very soon next times, we need to have some of these ambassadors that we're describing on the show, so that other people can get a visual and get the heart of what they're up to live. Let's do that.
Yeah, we will. And like you said, we're all spread out, but who cares? We have technology on our side.
That's right.
And we'll make it happen, because I know that people love to hear from all the other guys. I mean, people, I get asked about, Elam everywhere we go. How's Elam doing? Or if Vic's not there, they ask about Vic,
right.
Or whomever. It's people want to hear from everybody, so I can't wait to have more people on. It'd be cool. It'd be less talking that I had to do, and more questions I can ask. So that just fits my type wonderfully. So
if you guys have topics that you want to hear about, write us at info@enneagramprisonproject.org or clay@enneagramprisonproject.org, or myself, Susan, and we're happy to field them. So it's a delight to be with you. I'd love to do this.
If one thing I've learned is that when we talk, no matter how long we talk, it could be 20 minutes or 2 hours. People have questions. Right. People want to know more. We didn't cover something specifically enough, and this is the opportunity to get involved. And we'll probably start reading some emails. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and say on the next episode, we will definitely read at least one email and answer at least one question.
Good.
So info@enneagramprisonproject.org. And we're easy to find on Facebook. The website, of course, is enneagramprisonproject.org. And get in touch with us. Even if you just send us a blank email with your signature, that'll just anything to get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. And Susan, it was great as always talking with you, and I enjoy. I really like what we're doing here, and I can't wait to do more. So
thank you, Clay.
Thanks for being willing to do this, and thanks for being. I'm glad to be on the team together. So
You're awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing what you do so well, Clay.
Alrighty, episode 2 of the Enneagram Prison Project podcast is in the books. Susan Olesic and I will be back in a couple days. We're going to bring episode 3 to you on Sunday evening, and I just want to reiterate that we want to hear from you. We want to interact with you. We want to know what it is that you want to see on the show, and as well as if there's any questions that you have. No matter how big or small, please be in touch with us. You can leave a comment below. You can send us a message here on Facebook. You can also email us. My email address is clay@enneagramprisonproject.org, susan@enneagramprisonproject.org, and info@enneagramprisonproject.org. Pretty much anything with our website, and it will get to one of us. So please be in touch. Let us know how we can serve you, as well as answer any questions you have. And we want this to be something that we hear back from others on. So please don't let this just be a thing where we talk the whole time. We want to get you involved as well. So that's going to do it for now, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday evening. Have a good weekend.